I must admit,
This week
I'm
on the
guilty.
Life Well
I
podcast.
was burnt out and I kept hearing the question, Catherine, how are you doing so well? And sometimes it's on the inside, I was screaming, I'm not doing well at all. I might look well. I might sound well, and I do appreciate the compliments if you tell me that I look well. I appreciate that. I might sound. Don't call it a comeback. I want you guys to call it a three-peat. Welcome back, or welcome to the Life Well Podcast, season number 3. As always, I am your host, Catherine Young. And as always, I am so happy and so shocked and so overwhelmed with joy that this community actually exists. And we're back and we're doing it again. If you've been rocking with me since the beginning, you're just as excited as I am about what you're seeing. Now we have a set, okay? We are moving on up to the east side to a deluxe apartment in the sky, good people. We're not in my home anymore. Can I call this Life Well Studios? There's no one here to tell me that I can't. So we've got more than a new location this season, but you'll have to stick around for all of those surprises. Do you want to make sure that you don't miss out on anything new? You know what to do. You need to click that button and make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that your post notifications are on so that you don't miss an update. You don't want to miss an announcement, and you also don't want to miss an episode. Now, this season, we're going on a journey, okay? Together into the kinds of things that just get in the way of doing well. This episode is for the faithful, for the frustrated, and for the almost finished. You've been doing well, but maybe you're not feeling well. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to not grow weary in well-doing, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I've had the pleasure, since we've been off, right? Because, most of the episodes usually come on in January. It is not January. Mind your business. I've had the pleasure of getting feedback this whole time. As I haven't been recording, I've been writing into all of the kinds of things that you guys want to hear about, the things you want me to study, the things you want me to talk about. And as always, we start with a question. But rather than it being a question that I'm genuinely asking you all, this has been a question I've been getting all year long. How are you doing so well? All things considered. Now, we're going to be going back and forth from the science to the scripture in this episode, but I want to start off right in the book that all of this is coming from. Galatians is Paul's passionate love letter to a group of believers who lost their footing. They started off in grace, okay? They started off in the spirit, free and full of faith, but somewhere along the way, they just got caught up trying to earn what God had already given them. Paul is like, y'all were running well. Who cut in? He's frustrated, but he's also kind of like being a parent in that way, like he's a good dad, reminding them that your faith in Jesus, okay, is how you got in this situation, not your faith in rule following or your faith in performance. It's your faith in Jesus that is going to serve you and ultimately sustain you. So when we look at Galatians, it's 6 chapters calling us back to freedom and back to love and back to the fruit of the Spirit. At its core, Galatians is about choosing relationship over religion and walking in the Spirit over striving in the flesh. And Paul is qualified, okay, to write this letter from this perspective because my dog was the blueprint for bondage and breakthrough. He lived a very legalistic life, okay? He was obsessed with rules and very religious to his core, okay? He was persecuting Christians thinking he was doing the right thing. He was very deep into the system. But then Jesus met him, kind of like he met our homegirl, the woman at the well. He met him, but his encounter wasn't at a well. It was on the road to Damascus. And Jesus met him there and flipped his whole identity inside out, gave him a new life. Okay? And it wasn't built on rule following. It was built on love, relationships, and freedom. So when Paul says, "For it is for freedom that Christ has set us free, stand firm, and then do not let yourselves be burdened again with the yoke of slavery." That's Galatians 5:1. He's not just being poetic, okay? Now, it is very poetic, but he's warning them and us that trying to earn God's love or people's approval is probably going to burn you out, and not just spiritually, mentally and emotionally, and sometimes even physically. The Galatians, somewhere along the way, they began to believe that they needed to do more. Okay, they had to obey old religious laws in order to be accepted and in order to be righteous. And that's when Paul steps in and he writes them this personal and passionate letter. It's full of urgency and love and disappointment. My favorite part, he says, "You were running well. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth?" That's in Galatians 5 and 7. So that verse is so important to me because so many of us have been there. We started this journey, whatever journey you're on, your fitness journey, your running journey. In season 1, I was on a running journey. Okay, it's season 3. We're not going to talk about that journey. We started a lot of things off in freedom. We, myself included, have started things in joy, and we were doing so well. And then life or comparison or hustle culture or religious shame or whatever it was, it cut in. And now you're just running tired. You're not running well, or maybe you're not even running at all. Burnout. That's what we call it in therapy. It's a state of chronic physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion, and that's caused by prolonged exposure to stress, especially when someone feels overextended or overwhelmed or unable to meet the ongoing demands of your work life or your home life or your dating life. Psychologically, burnout includes 3 main components. The first one is exhaustion. Okay? You're feeling drained. You're feeling depleted, like you have nothing left to give. And the second component of that would be detachment. Okay? You are emotionally distant. You're negative. You're less connected to your work or to your responsibilities and the things that once mattered to you. And that third component, that's a reduced sense of effectiveness. Sometimes it's not even that you're less effective. You just don't feel as effective. And like you've heard me say before, feelings are a gauge. They're not a guide. But if you feel like you're not doing enough, you're not doing things well, or your effort doesn't make a difference, you may be susceptible to burnout. So in simple terms, a definition, because we love definitions, burnout happens when the demand on your energy consistently, keyword, consistently exceeds the resource that you need to restore it. Burnout is the kind of thing that keeps you from getting closer, okay? And that's probably because getting closer to your passion, getting closer to the Lord, getting closer to your spouse sounds like a lot more work. And it is. And work is the reason why I'm burnt out. So why would I want to do more work? But getting closer is the more relevant work. But that can be hard when we equate time to dollars. Time is money, right? But it takes time to build relationships or even have a valid awareness that that time is being spent doing things that are going to add value to your life. Understanding that using your time wisely creates a window of opportunity to do something that is beneficial. When we lack that realization, burnout and laziness start to become words that we use interchangeably. They're not the same thing, okay? Burnout and laziness are 2 separate words for a reason. Burnout is physiological, your physical body, okay? It's an emotional response as well, as a result of being exposed to stress over a long period of time, especially when your output consistently, keyword, consistently overextends your income, okay? Laziness, however, is being unwilling, okay? You're unwilling, you're not interested to exert any effort. You want the things that come. You want that award. You want that opportunity. You want that accolade, but you don't want to actually put in the work that it takes to get that. Now, that could be just seen as laziness. Burnout, though, it often hits people when they're not being still. It hits you when you're moving, maybe even doing too much, especially in the wrong area. So you can be doing good things for others and still neglecting yourself. Okay, this is a safe space. You could be showing up for your job as you should. You should be showing up for your church as you should, your kids as you should, and not be showing up for your own mental health or your sleep or your joy. You can be high functioning and still be falling apart on the inside. We hide. Our culture, oh goodness, it's so easy to hide too. If you've got a good phone and you've got a good location, you can hide behind a photograph. You can hide behind productivity. You can hide behind ministry. You can hide behind being the strong one, because if I'm doing good, then I must be okay, right? No, because if we go back to Paul's letter, Galatians is a letter about burnout, about spiritual anxiety, about striving without intimacy. Paul is talking to believers who began in freedom but reverted to legalism. They started off in the spirit, but got caught up in performing, and that would eventually lead to burnout. It happens to us too. Burnout whispers, you're not enough unless you're achieving. It tells us rest is laziness and grace is weakness. But Paul says the opposite. In Galatians 5:4, he says, you who were trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. Grace meaning the unmerited favor of God. So this letter gives us a perspective to digest that burnout isn't just tiredness, it's also disconnection from God, from yourself, from your joy, because performance will always rob you of presence. Burnout is a body response from your nervous system and your brain after long-term exertion. It's saying, I can't do anymore. I don't have any gas in the tank. Without enough emotional return, you're going to burn out. Okay? Burnout happens, again, imagine that I had a scale, okay? Burnout happens when there's an imbalance between your output and your input. You're giving, and you're giving, and you're giving, and you're giving, and you're pouring, and you're pouring. Hey, I'm going to fall over in this chair if I keep my visual going. You're doing all of these things, right? You're creating, and you're loving, and you're listening, and slowly your body's like, hey, can we stop for a little gas? I'm not okay. Your cortisol level, we talked about this last season, that stress hormone, it's elevated all the time, and it's keeping you in survival mode. And when you stay in survival mode too long, your dopamine system, that reward system, it starts to flatline, okay? And that's when the numbness sets in. That's when the low motivation sets in. If you've ever been irritated after working really hard, even on something you like, you could be a little burnt out. Or the sudden disinterest in everything you used to enjoy starts to pop up. So we want to think about this critically, because the work you're doing might actually be good, okay? You're parenting with intention. Those babies love you, and they should. You're showing up for your clientele. Every time somebody books you for a bust down middle part, my hair girlies, you're showing up and you're doing the hair. You're doing something meaningful. You're leading in your church or even in the community. But even the right thing can exhaust you when there is no space for recovery. And if you grew up in the church, you probably heard things like, don't grow weary, be not anxious, count it all joy, all true, all scripture. But what we're not often taught is these verses are talking to someone who is full, a filled believer. Those verses are talking, saying you are also being poured into by the Holy Spirit, not just pouring out. So what's really happening in your mind and in your body when you burn out, when it's taking hold, what does that look like? There's a rewiring. We talked about neuroplasticity before. There's a rewiring in your brain's reward system. Usually when we talk about neuroplasticity, I'm using it to our advantage. You've experienced a trauma. Your brain can recover from that. You've experienced a loss. Your brain can recover from that. You can practice new things, and it will learn how to do a new thing. But if you practice a bad thing, it's gonna learn how to do a bad thing. If your reward system gets all wackadoodle, your emotional regulation is now wackadoodle, your motivation has now been hijacked, and here's the truth, okay? Sometimes it's hard to admit. It can happen when you're doing good stuff. You are pouring into people, producing excellence and pushing through, all while your body is quietly breaking down. And your spirit drifting away from God. And that's because, although we are spiritual beings, we are also biological ones. And when our emotional need for affirmation and rest and connection and friendship and laughter, when that stuff goes unmet, your brain starts to register depletion, okay? Instead of delight. Legalism, this strict, Everybody's saying it these days. I say it all the time. I'm running a strict program. How strict is your program? Does your program include a nap? Does your program include respite and care and recovery? Because if your program is so strict, we might start sounding like the Galatians. Legalism demands performance without nourishment, without intimacy, with God, with yourself, and with others. We need that. It creates sustainability. And when you lose that intimacy, you lose the fruit that comes from it. Now, let's look at things from a kind of scientific lens because we love the science. Dopamine, like I said, it's the reward center, okay? It's the piece that makes us feel good. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter and it plays a key role in motivation, in attention, and the experience of pleasure and reward. It's what drives you to act. When you anticipate a reward, whether it's external, like somebody's gonna give you a piece of candy, or internal, that sense of pride, dopamine is released. When the reward actually matches or exceeds your expectations, dopamine increases, right? That's like the surprise that you get. For Valentine's Day, my friends were so sweet to me. I had a friend deliver me flowers. I wasn't expecting that. I had such a fun time. Another one of my friends dropped off donuts. I love donuts. Who is upset at a donut? That exceeded my expectations. I had already made brunch plans for the day, but I didn't know I was going to receive that kind of love and support from my community. So my motivation to continue in this pathway of self-love and self-care increased. My motivation went up. My dopamine went up because of something that happened externally. But when the reward is absent or repeatedly delayed, dopamine decreases, okay? Then we have apathy and demotivation and sometimes a little bit of just some emotional fatigue. There's another neurotransmitter that I want to talk about that's important because if we don't think about how this is all playing into one another, we'll get lost. And psychologically, humans are wired for feedback loops. We adjust our behavior based on input and output and results. Phenomenons like operant conditioning, a lot of people who study psychology know about that. It's when our feedback loop breaks that's important. When you're consistently doing something good and you get whether you wanted acknowledgement or validation or you don't feel a sense of progress, it causes an emotional kind of dissonance, right? These thoughts that are fighting each other and cognitive fatigue. And you keep showing up and no one's showing up for you. And that's where our emotions and our productivity are now coming into alignment. Because if my expectation, let's take this podcast, for example. If my expectation, I sit down and record, or I did all of season 2, or I do something like She's Well, and nobody buys a ticket or nobody watches an episode, if the only measure that suggests I did well is if I have 10 million views and I sold 500 tickets, then I'm going to be in bad shape. Okay, because I don't have 10 million views and I didn't sell 500 tickets, but I do have a level of satisfaction with the way that I'm in partnership with the Lord, where He's given me to give out into the world. Whoever watches it, whoever likes it, whoever purchases a ticket for She's Well, shameless plug. Can I talk about She's Well in the first episode? We'll hold out for the rest, okay? But this kind of feedback adds value to our life. And when our emotions are in a space where we don't feel an internal level of satisfaction, and it's only coming from external validation, our propensity to be burnt out is going to increase. But this can also look like you keep praying and heaven's been quiet. Or you keep giving and it feels like no one is pouring into you, or you're just pouring into a black hole. That's not just spiritual warfare. At times it is, but it is also a psychological feedback problem at its baseline. Another important phenomenon when we talk about burnout is social evaluation and belonging, which we will be talking about quite a bit in season 3. Humans are socially regulated. Our sense of self-worth is tied to how other people respond to us. And when people consistently ignore you or your contributions or fail to affirm you, sometimes we grow up in households that lack affirmation and validation, and it's not reflective back to us when we do a good job or we've accomplished a new goal, and nobody sees how much effort you're putting in. It can lead to feedback deprivation, which could undermine your confidence and potentially your motivation, and at times, at its worst, your whole identity. And I see this a lot, especially in women and marginalized groups, and especially caregivers as well. The research is indicating that feedback deprivation leads to chronic stress, chronic thoughts of undervaluing your own work, and a level of learned helplessness. Sometimes it even leads to perfectionism or overfunctioning, which is going to have a huge impact on your mental health. So, the whole point of this podcast is that it adds value to your life. What are we going to do about it? We need to figure out how to restore healthy feedback. An internal feedback practice would look like daily affirmations. I'm as kind. I'm as smart. I'm as important. That counts. Okay. Verbal praise, even to yourself, does go a long way. But as I said, I think that was season 1. I can't remember which episode it was, affirming with a word. What you believe matters. So if you're affirming something that you don't believe, then that's just going to read in the brain as a lie. So other things that you can do for internal feedback practices is journaling your small wins, keeping track of your day, keeping track of the data of your life. I really do enjoy what the iPhone has done with the journaling app. For those of you who don't like to write, your hand gets a little cramped, you don't have no access to fancy pens, totally fine. If you have an iPhone, sorry to Android. I don't anticipate that you all are going to get it. I don't know much about it. iPhones have a journaling app, and you can put like snapshots of pictures or food you ate that day, music you listened to, people you connected to. You can keep a daily log of that, and that is an internal feedback practice that will mitigate some of the thoughts that lead to burnout. And another practice could be reflective prayer, where what a novel idea. Maybe we let God speak. Not just venting. What does that actually look like? I have asked that question to the ministers and elders that are in my life because I'm not one of those. But I asked, okay, if I let God speak, like, how do I do that? And then they'll start talking. They'll say, something wise and sound and prophetic. And then they'll be like, so what were you just doing while I was talking? And I said, I was listening to you talk. They said, you got it. You got it. That's exactly how you do it. So my advice to you is the same. Once you finish your prayer, sit a while, okay? You got to give them time to speak back to you. And another piece of advice I've heard from clergy members, people who study the literature of scripture and things like that, the word, right? He wrote us a book. So from time to time, you might find something that's relating to your situation in the actual scriptures in the Bible. But when it comes to external feedback practices, that's going to look a little bit different. Sometimes, especially with like work-related things, you're going to have to ask for feedback from friends that you trust if you're trying to grow in your personal life, mentors that you trust if you're trying to grow in your creative life, or even supervisors if you're in a situation in your professional career where it's time to elevate. Another kind of external way is practicing gratitude with other people, right? Note when somebody is doing the best they can with what they've got so that it becomes a safe space for them to acknowledge when you're doing your absolute best. Also, reframing work as worship, right? I talked about me being in partnership with the Lord. He's given me a gift. I'm very excited about it. And I believe it is about the greater good. It is about going from glory to glory to glory. So even in my delay, because there was quite a delay when it came to the recording and the writing and all of the things for season 3, something that kept me accountable was this isn't just something fun, glitzy, and glam that I get to do. Now, I love the studio. It's glitz and glam, but this isn't just that. This work means something for my life and for all of the lives that are connected to the gift that God decided to send to the earth through me. So we want to reframe work as worship so that well done at the very end of all of this carries more weight than any person's silence ever could. So this is an invitation, okay? Not just to do more task-wise, but to come closer to what the Lord is calling you to do, because burnout is a loud signal that something deeper is misaligned, and it is not just your calendar, okay? It's not just your schedule. It is probably your source, okay? And maybe you're like the Galatians. You started this journey in the spirit with joy, with surrender, and with awe, but somewhere along the way, you picked up performance again, and maybe you're exhausted. But it's not because you are weak. It's because you've been working without connection. What if your healing isn't actually about doing better? It's about drawing nearer. The fruit of the Spirit isn't the result of hustle. It is the overflow of abiding, okay? You don't earn fruit. You remain rooted. You stay close. You let love lead. You remember that you are not just a servant checking boxes. You are a child at the table of the Most High God. You can be doing good things and bearing no fruit if your heart, your mind, and your body are not well. So before we keep going in this season, before we talk about showing up and leading and healing and becoming a girl boss and all of that, let's be honest. Am I doing well or am I just doing good? 3 John 1 and 2 says, Beloved, I pray that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. It's not just about what you produce. It's about what you're doing and how you're doing it while you're producing it. So why does this matter? Because as we draw near and we draw from a well that never runs dry, we become a well in our own right to lead others back to God. So why do you not need to be burnt out, stressed out, crashing out? You need to be full because you are a well. Is this a safe space? Because it's time to dig a little bit deeper. And from February 2025 to August 2025, I must admit, I'm guilty. I was burnt out. And I kept hearing the question, Catherine, how are you doing so well? And sometimes it's on the inside, I was screaming, I'm not doing well at all. I might look well. I might sound well, and I do appreciate the compliments if you tell me that I look well. I appreciate that. I might sound well, and sometimes the truth is I was barely holding it together. Sometimes I was doing the bare minimum. Other times I was doing the absolute most, but just not in the areas that matter the most. And I whispered to myself, girl, what happened? You were running well. And that is straight from the Bible. We just talked about that with Paul in Galatians 5 and 7. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth? And that's a good question, Paul. So I started asking myself that. Who cut in? What cut in? And for quality assurance purposes, I shall not name the names, people, or places or things here, but I wrote it down. Y'all know how I feel about my journal. I wrote it down and I asked myself, young lady, when did that pop up? This need to please, this fear of letting other people down, when did that cut in? When did that cut in? When did it cut in? And when I was able to pinpoint a time, I then had to double back and ask, okay, did that cut in or did I let it in? And I didn't like the answer to that question because when I reflect on that time period, so many things caught me like off guard. It took me by surprise. It came out of nowhere. Like getting the news that what we thought was dehydration with my father was actually the need for a triple bypass surgery that then elevated into something else. I was running well. Okay? I was doing good. I was the second semester of my first year of PhD program. I was running well, and that cut in. And I remember going to my car in the parking garage of the hospital after they told us, hey, we're actually, we're going to need to do surgery, open heart surgery on your father. I went to my car with the hopes that I just needed a little break and I could keep running, right? I could stay strong. And then in an attempt to keep going, I went to school that following week. I was in a PhD program. I got to make everybody proud. And I tried to end the spring semester strong. Literally this time last year, now that I think about it, without any of my professors knowing what was going on with my family. And then there was a school shooting. I was running kind of okay, and then that cut in. I stayed home for a few days. I went to Easter service. Literally, Easter was yesterday. I'm just now realizing this was a year ago. Like, nothing happened, and I looked like I was still running, but that was not the case. Then my dad had a stroke, and that came out of nowhere. It was like I was running, but then somebody elbowed me, like, from behind or tripped me. And as the symptoms progressed, my dad lost mobility, and those days felt like years, to be completely honest. And at this point, I'm not running, okay? I'm walking well-ish, right? I'm in and out of a rehab facility visiting my father. I'm working full-time. I'm enrolled in my first practicum, and I'm grateful to have finished season 2 last summer somehow. I did an international conference for school last summer somehow, and I hosted She's Well, but behind closed doors, I wasn't running, and I was not well. My everyday responsibilities, plus the weight of a new normal, fears about midnight phone calls and what that meant, all of that was constant, and it wore me out. Okay, I was still barely moving, let alone running. I definitely wasn't running. And I wasn't running as closely with the Lord anymore. I was pushing to keep up, to look like I wasn't tired and function with the same pace, but more weight. So I put my head down. That's what the people say, put your head down and run, metaphorically. But when I finally looked up, I wasn't even in my lane. And I had to reconcile with myself. A new level of burnout is setting in, and my fatigue, so many different things, looked like help. Emphasis on the word look. Relationships and opportunities that I knew better than to entertain looked like help at first. Someone kind of like pacing beside me saying, come on, that's a little faster. You can do it. Just a little while longer. You can do it. No, actually, come this way. No, it's fine. You don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to focus on that anymore. And before I knew it, I wasn't running at all. I was quite literally being dragged by life. But here's what I'm learning. And I share, my life with you guys because I hope that it's relatable. Here's what I've learned. God is not grading you on how much you can hold it together. There's no test. I promise. He's inviting you. It's an invitation into a life that you can actually fall apart in him, and still be loved and still be supported and still be seen and still be chosen. You are still worthy of rest and of peace and of healing. It's in that relational transformation that the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's in that kind of environment that all of those fruits grow. They grow out of proximity. What is the cure to burnout? In my opinion, proximity. Because I don't know about you. I don't have a green thumb. We've talked about this before. But one thing I do know is if you sit a seed next to a pot of soil, a week later, you know what you're going to have? A seed next to a pot of soil. You're going to have to put the seed in the soil. Okay? And honestly, 3 weeks later, you may not have a seed next to the pot of soil. The wind may have come and just taken your seed all the way away. Birds may have come and, set a nest in your soil. If it's not deeply intertwined, if it's not deeply rooted, if there's not a symbiotic relationship with the Lord, there's no opportunity for growth. Intimacy is what beats burnout. That's the conclusion that I have come to. And that's the part that I think a lot of us miss. We lack intimacy with God. We try to fake fruit. We try to look healed and look holy and look whole when really you are just exhausted. And if you're anything like me, you're probably out of alignment. A difficulty that I see in practice and in my own life is how loose values and a shaky identity can create a system of being motivated exclusively by things like consequences or rewards. These things are transient, okay? They change over time. So it becomes hard to become consistent or truly at peace, ever, right? It burdens us with impossible standards while offering no healing and no wholeness in the area of the underlying issue. And it's no wonder that we are burnt out. And I say we, like literally, you and I. Galatians 3:3 says, are you so foolish? Is that sharp? Did that make your chest drop? That's an interesting question to ask somebody, Paul. Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh? When it came time for me to write season 3, that question rang in my ears so loud because I wanted to have a system. I wanted to make sure that everything was going to be right and everything was going to be perfect and it was going to be organized with all of my classes and I was going to record during the breaks and I was going to post during the breaks and everything was going to be perfect. And that is not how me and the Holy Spirit got through season 1 or 2. That's not how we got through She's Well 1 or 2. There was a holy system that I completely neglected. So that question, are you so foolish? Boop, should have had a V8. That's how it felt. So what Paul is saying to them is what I am saying to you about your weariness, your lack of success, even your weariness in waiting on the house or the healing or the wholeness or the freedom. Maybe it's actually not about trying harder. Maybe it's about getting closer. This season of the Life Well podcast is about learning how to live well, okay? But living well doesn't always start with success. It starts with faithfulness. So if you are tired or discouraged or wondering if what you're doing matters, the answer to your question is yes. You should keep doing good. But we want to make sure that as you're showing up, you are also being consistent with your faithfulness to the Lord and His timing, because the seeds that you're planting today will become the harvest that you thank Him for in the future. And one thing I've learned as a therapist is that insight is powerful. It's actually one of the key markers that we track in progress in therapy, the development of insight, the development of awareness. But transformation, now that's different. That usually happens through reflection and practice. So before we wrap up, you know what time it is, time for a little bit of homework. I want you to take a few minutes this week and I want you to ask yourself some questions. Number one, where in my life am I feeling weary from doing good? Not feeling weary from texting the person that you know you're not supposed to be texting. That's going to make you feel weary because you're not supposed to be talking to them, okay? Catch it if you need to catch it. Where in my life am I feeling weary from doing good? I feel weary from writing papers, but I have to. That's a good thing, right? So that's my example. Where in my life am I feeling weary from doing good? That's question number one. Question number two, what seed am I planting right now that I hope will grow later? All of the years I spent in my master's program, all of the clients' hours, the clinical hours that I had to get to sit for my licensure exam was all to build up to the point where I could be able to have a private practice one day. I think back to the day I decided to apply to my master's program. And I didn't necessarily have all of the Life Well podcast and the Life Well Center and being able to do practice while being in school. I didn't have that in mind. Obviously, God had it in mind, but I did it. But the seed that I planted in 2020 is now fruit that is bearing here now in 2026. So what seed are you planting right now that you hope will grow later? And then question number three, what would it look like? Okay, think critically about this last one. What would it look like for me to stay faithful in this season where I am right now instead of giving up? How do you stay faithful in the coursework and the homework that you don't want to do when everyone else is out at brunch? How do you stay faithful to your workout routine? This question is for me. This is getting a little personal. How do I stay faithful in my workout routine when Crafty Crab is having a sale, right? When there is a new boil on the menu, but it doesn't go with my caloric intake for the week? How do I stay faithful instead of giving up? I want you to reflect on these questions so that we can continue to develop our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors as we navigate all the way through season 3. We're starting off with this idea of doing well because you have so many gifts. You have so many talents. You have treasures, and the Lord wants to be in partnership with you. But I don't want you to end up like I did. I don't want you to be running well, and then there's so much room in your life because you're not being faithful and we're not being attentive to the needs of our physical body and our mind and our heart, that something cuts in. Now, life does happen, right? I didn't anticipate my dad getting sick. I didn't anticipate him going to a rehab facility. There were some things that I saw coming in my direction, though. And honestly, it was those things that knocked me off of my footing the most because it looked like help and it actually wasn't. And I would have known that if I was being more faithful to myself, more faithful to God, and more faithful to the things that He has called me to do. So we're going on this journey together. I hope you're excited about it. Please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube. You should be following us on Instagram. We also have a TikTok if that is something that you're interested in. As always, if you want to share your homework with me, I'm interested in it. If you want full-blown therapy, we're going to have to find you some referrals, okay? We're going to have to get you in the face of somebody who can kind of process these questions, these emotions, and these feelings with you. But for the purposes of your viewing pleasure, I am always here. We have so many episodes in store, and I can't wait to see where you end up on the end of this journey. So, as always, I hope this episode found you well, and if not, I hope that you become well, and prayerfully, we all stay well. I'm Catherine, and this is the Life Well podcast.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I am proud of you because you have overcome so much, yet you have so much more to accomplish. Everything that you so desire will be yours because why you chose to heal instead of harm. Everything that you even think according to His will will come to pass just because of the healing mindset that you're moving forward into. And this will be your best year yet. Just continue to trust him, regardless of what it looks like, because he sees it all.